And we're live.
All right, welcome back to World's Strongest Opinions, episode 43. Joining us once again is Tyler Davis, the Bama Hammer, and his rides coach along, Chris Jacheo.
Jacheo.
Yep,
Jacheo.
Got to get that right.
Welcome.
Welcome
Takes
to the
practice,
show, guys.
just like everything. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Repetition. I'll just have to say it 100 times.
Yeah, how are you both doing? Tyler, how are you feeling since the Chaos Classic?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Like, actually, after each event, I really didn't feel like I had done that much. I was actually in really good condition for Chaos. I don't know if my strength was perfectly peaked, but I was definitely in good cardiovascular shape.
Yeah, you got some really great pictures out there too, because you did Highland Games, right?
Yeah, we did Highland Games just like a week later. Yeah, I didn't have any soreness. We drove around, went up to Durness, Scotland, and I did my first Highland Games actually in Scotland.
Nice.
In Durness. It was on like this bluff with a beautiful beach, and like blue, crystal clear blue water. Just people came from like all out of the woodwork in Scotland. I competed against one guy who's like 6'7", some kind of shot put world champion. So I got smoked by a couple guys, but I did beat a couple newbies. There were a couple guys there. It was kind of their first time too. So I had just the raw strength to be able to beat those two guys. But the two experienced guys were good. But I had a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, when you have the shoulder power to just like throw a 22-pound rock like 25 feet, man.
Well,
Yeah,
let me tell you something about Tyler. Tyler is one big type 2 muscle fiber. So anything that has to do with anything explosive or fast, he's going to be good at. So,
yeah, I was always more, and I was usually the fastest kid on the playground, for the sprints. But if we had to run a mile run, I would get smoked on that.
I was the same way in high school. I could sprint, but yeah.
Hey, are you partaking in a beverage tonight?
I'm always partaking in a beverage, man. Cheers. What are you drinking, Tyler?
Glenmorangie, actually. Some nice scotch.
Having some scotch. I'm drinking bourbon. I just finished a bottle of the Glenlivet.
Okay.
Just drink a little Buffalo Trace tonight because that's actually probably one of my favorite bourbons. I've got Eagle Rare and Blanton's, but I'm just drinking the Buffalo Trace tonight.
Just me and you again, then.
Well, I'm gonna stick with water. I don't know how it's gonna mix with the pain pills for my shoulder surgery.
Oh, that's right.
Got to be careful.
It'll make them better.
Say.
It'll make them better.
Yeah, who knows what I'll say.
Yeah, but my coach gets all the injuries for me, so I don't have to get them. So.
I was going to say, because you're just recovering from shoulder replacement surgery, which is substantial.
Yes. Yeah, we had the ball replaced. We didn't replace the socket.
Oh, wow.
So my ortho was we did some research, and he said that I'll be able to perform again at a higher level if I just replace the ball, which will leave me in some pain, but I'm okay with that if I've got mobility and performance. I'm looking forward to getting back in the game a little bit after this heals up. But I'm 6 weeks out, so we're still baby stepping it.
How long is the recovery on a shoulder replacement?
Well, the average person, a year, but I'm not the average person, so
sure.
I'm thinking that I'll be able to start, some sort of strength training in about 6 months, where I can start pushing it a little bit.
Sure.
And I'm just going to take it step by step and see how it goes. My range of motion is way better than it was before the surgery. It's way further along than it should be, so that's a good thing. We're already starting, static strengthening, so it's coming along.
Nice. So they got you doing the 3-pound dumbbells, basically.
Oh, we're up to 9 pounds right now.
All right. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
That's really awesome.
I detached my distal bicep tendon, so that's the closest I have experience with post-surgery, post-operation recovery.
That's the knee scrape of strongman.
Exactly. That's what
I heard Bob Schwantz say that one time.
That's awesome.
And it's stuck with me. But I've detached my distal bicep, both my triceps, and a partial tear in my pec, and the shoulder has been something that just accumulated over a long period of time. So, high mileage, definitely.
Yeah, it catches up with you. I mean, we were just talking about our ages, and I got down on the floor to do some some stretching here today, and I'm like, God, I hurt way too much for as little as that I do these days, man.
Yep. It's worth it to me though.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not gonna stop. I'm just gonna keep going as hard as I can, and I guess we'll find out if I find a tolerance level, a threshold where I can't handle it anymore.
Yep.
Not there yet, but yeah.
That's the thing about us master athletes, man. We're different. You know, we gotta focus on longevity. You know, we're only gonna get so much stronger, you know, and just continue to try to progress as best we can.
Yeah. Stay in the game, man. That's
Exactly.
my goal now.
Exactly.
So, but you wanted to talk about, I mean, you said you had a lot to talk about, Chris. A lot of various topics, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that so I'm just gonna go guns blazing.
Guns blazing, man. It's just world's strongest opinions, man. We're controversial. That's what we do.
Well, here's the thing. I think that, you know, I'm a coach, and I'm more a coach than I've ever been an athlete. I will tell anybody any day of the week that I'm a much better coach than I've ever been an athlete. And that's something that I've also heard Mike Westerling say, who is a phenomenal coach.
Yeah,
you know, and
great
you know,
pedigree.
he coached my coach, which was Chris Slater. So I feel like there's a strong lineage there. But when I think about a good strongman coach, it's not always the best athlete. And so what we have now, so let me take a step back. You guys talk about standardization a lot, right? Standardization with the implements, with, you know, the events, and it kind of goes hand in hand with coaching. We don't have any kind of standardization, any kind of certification, anything like that for someone to be a strongman coach that I know of. I mean, there's a few people out there that have kind of put forth their own little, you know, certification, and that's great. That's a start, right? But you know, as far as like, if you look at, well, I think the NSCA now is pushing to incorporate a lot of strongman in their curriculum. I'm certified under NASM, and there's literally nothing, and I'm hoping that I can maybe bring something to the table there. But as far as strongman itself goes, what you have is a lot of athletes that are becoming coaches. And I might sound a little hypocritical because that's what I did. However, I had a plan. You know, as I said, you know, my coach was Chris Slater. When I decided that I wanted to take a bigger role in the sport, I realized, because I got into strongman in my 40s, I realized that I wasn't going to have a whole lot of time in the sport. I wanted to stay involved in it somehow. So, you know, I shadowed that guy as much as I could and took in as much knowledge as I could and considered that my certification, you know. So when I started training athletes, it was people that I was training with at the gym. And I said, hey, you know, let's see how this goes. And kind of built my resume from there. Started realizing, I was like, well, I'm putting people on a podium. I'm doing something right, you know. So then I started chasing education. Long story short, most of the people that I see out there right now are phenomenal athletes, and then they have a bunch of people that they're coaching, and they're coaching them like they compete, like they train. And that doesn't always work because everybody's different.
Right.
Tyler's a perfect example. You know, Tyler is, like I said, he's one big type 2 muscle fiber. That's a joke I always say. I'm completely the opposite. You know, so if I were to program him like I program myself, it wouldn't work. I had to learn Tyler and learn how he trains, how he needs to train, how he competes, how he performs. Same thing with all my other clients. Todd Williams is a good example. You know, the guy came to me with several injuries and a lot of static strength. And I started looking at it and I said, oh, this guy's strong, but he's not really fit enough to get much stronger. That's something I've heard Matt Wenning say. And I was like, okay, well, let me try to apply that to him. So we worked on his fitness, got his conditioning up. Next thing you know, he's getting on podiums too. And it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn here, but I'm really just trying to make examples of how people are different and how I think that a good coach is someone who understands all the facets of the sport, all the different type of people that come to the sport, and through education and eventually certification, we can kind of narrow it down to who's who and who's actually coaching people correctly and safely, more importantly than anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree. Somehow I muted myself. I agree I haven't been muted for very long, have I, John? I hope not.
No,
I don't even
you
know
weren't
when I
muted
muted
at all.
myself. But no, I agree. We've kind of talked about that on the show before. That, I mean, it does seem like a lot of athletes just go and try to take what they've done that works for themselves and just pass it off as coaching, or even worse, that I see a lot of times is people just regurgitate what their coaches gave them, right?
Yeah.
And then just pass it off. It's all cookie cutter at that point, right? And yeah, we talked about that extensively. I talk about that extensively with my coach too. That yeah, it's got to be individualized to at least to a certain extent. I mean, if you're new, maybe you can go and do the old Bill Starr 5x5 and make some gains. But the more advanced athlete you become, you certainly need to have a much more tailored program to meet your objectives, man. So I agree. 100%.
I agree. I think that like even new guys, you can. I have a huge questionnaire that I give all my athletes when they onboard with me, and I learn as much as I can about them through that, and that's how I get started. So I've got a teen athlete right now that competed a little bit before he started working with me, but wasn't training strongman per se at all. He was just a strong kid, and learning him, through that onboarding and through working with him has, developed him into a much better athlete. He just won his teens class at Alabama Strongest Man, competed with Tyler this a couple weekends ago, Jonathan McCleskey, and he's going to do great things. So I lost track here. I do that. I ramble. What it comes down to is like I'm saying, it's if we educate ourselves as coaches, we become better coaches. And individualization. Here's another thing. If we're charging these athletes what we're charging them, it should be individualized. It should not be regurgitated. It should not be cookie cutter, because I know what other coaches are charging people. And, I sometimes I shake my head a little bit because I see what they're giving them.
Yeah.
So, I think there's definitely an ethical standard there that maybe we should think about a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, if anybody's paying like $200 plus a month, they should be getting some kind of individualized programming and a little bit of one-on-one time at least. Yeah, I think you do see that a lot, and I mean, overall, it'd be good to see some sort of certification, like you said, some sort of standards. I don't have any ideas. I mean, hopefully, maybe you do on how that becomes implemented in strongman. But it would be great for the athlete's perspective. I mean, again, paying that much money, you want to get the value out of it. You don't want to be the third tier athlete and somebody's being favored, right? There's favoritism and somebody's getting more for the same amount of money that you are. And yeah, again, right back to that individualization is just huge, man.
Yeah. And believe me, I want to coach winners, but the way I look at it is anybody who I coach, it's up to me to make them a winner. It's up to both of us. They got to do the work.
Sure.
But there's always that potential, so as far as favoritism goes, and I see that a lot too. There's a lot of clickiness with some coaches. I've got a client right now that came to me and said, look, this guy takes care of his buddies better than he takes care of everybody else. And, I just want to try something else. And, I hate to hear that, but
that's one of the reasons that I actually, the guy that I went to ultimately for coaching, I mean, I did most of my own programming for most of the time that I was doing strongman, but the last year or two, I found somebody, and one of the number one criteria for a coach for me was they didn't coach any of my competition.
That was Tyler's criteria for a long time there.
Yeah,
that's keeping you secret for a while.
Yeah. So I went out and I actually found somebody that wasn't a strongman coach because I knew strongman. And I found somebody that knew what I needed to work on, which was athleticism more than anything.
I'm so glad you said that.
So I went and I found a sports performance coach. did amazing things with me, right? And it was a good sounding board. Also, he and I it was more of a collaboration effort than, here, just do everything for me. We worked together to make, a program that was really beneficial for me.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up about an athletic performance coach, because, well, I mean, I just passed the PES Performance Enhancement Specialist certification through NASM. And one of the reasons that I did that was because I was listening to Shane German talk with MST Systems. And I was looking at the way he programs and the way he trains his people. And I was like, man, he takes so much out of athletic performance, like beyond what is just being done in strongman. I'm watching deceleration drills, all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, this guy's smart. And I heard him talk about the different courses and certifications that a person should have if they're going to be a coach. And I was like, well, I got to chase that now, and that's what I did. So it's important. There's little things that you can take from that. I mean, and I'm not just a strongman coach. I coach powerlifters. I coach a rugby player. And Gen Pop too. I'm a personal trainer with Gen Pop, which, that's, you got to make a living. So I do that too.
I have no idea what Gen Pop is.
General population.
Oh, general population. Okay.
Yeah.
Like a dance or something.
Yeah. I was like, Gen Pop, is this like some kind of like,
Yeah. Well, while you are talking, something made me think of, I saw something, I don't know who posted it, but one of the things they posted was, just because you have a world-class athlete doesn't necessarily mean you're a world-class coach. And, like some coaches, like, well, Jacheo says, it doesn't matter if they're necessarily winning when they come to me or not, And with me, like, I'd never even done strongman or any strength sports. And I think my deadlift was like at about 400 pounds when I started with Jacheo. So I had a really long way to go. And I think I just had, I guess, maybe some athletic potential, but I've never been a superstar in any particular thing,
I think it can go both ways, though. I'm pretty positive some coaches just luck out and end up with really amazing athletes too, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there are coaches. I'm not going to say any names out there that aren't really great coaches, but have phenomenal athletes that they're coaching at least for a time, right?
Actually, well, another thing that's really important is having the passion for the sport.
Right.
And that was Jacheo. One of the first days I started was like, yes, the one thing coaches can't give athletes is passion for this.
Right. So that kind of goes back to what he said earlier, that the athletes have to do the work.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like a Hooper.
You can be a great coach, but if your athlete doesn't put in effort, like they're not going to go anywhere.
well, not saying Big Laws is not a great coach, but like, Hooper signed up with him, and Hooper wins World's Strongest Man like a couple months later. Man.
Right.
I think Big Laws kind of made a joke about that too. He's like, well, it's not necessarily my doing, but.
Yeah, Hoop was already a great athlete, but
Big Laws does have a good stable of athletes. Though.
He does.
Andrea
He
Thompson,
does.
like, it's insane.
Yeah.
Like, seeing the roster of people that he trained recently, it's pretty wild, though. We just had to throw that out there.
Yeah,
something about those UK folks, man. I mean, that's why I'm trying to tap into that system. So,
yeah, but Laws has got like,
It's true.
I mean, he was in the sport for 20 years or something, right? I mean, still takes a big part of it. So, I mean, clearly the dude knows it. But I mean, like, going back to like the sport performance and athleticism, I think a lot of coaches just overlook that. A lot of athletes overlook at the importance of it. It becomes kind of a repetitious, just go and do the events, right? This day you're going to deadlift, this day you're going to do log, this day you're going to do yoke, right? Outstones and whatever. And there's just a big piece that is not really talked about a lot in strongman, and that's doing, speed drills, doing sprints, doing conditioning, doing, whatever it is. And conditioning doesn't necessarily have to be doing, 10 sets of yoke or something. I mean, my coach just had me doing, swinging hammers, hitting tires, and doing sit-ups, and then, sprinting with a sled.
that sounds familiar.
Yeah. And I actually found a lot of benefit from doing less like maximal effort work, where, a lot of athletes, you still see it a lot. That, I mean, we talk about Matthias Kilskowski all the time, like always just going for broke every time. Of course, he's a great athlete, but like it has diminishing returns, right?
Yeah,
That's true.
absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I take a lot of pride in myself is that, like Tyler, I've kept him in the sport uninjured for going on 5 years now, and I can say that pretty much about all my athletes. It's because I think about that. You know, there's so much crossover with the performance, athletic performance side of things, and when you start to factor in recovery and you start thinking about how an athlete recovers. Now there is a difference between the way an athlete recovers and a strongman recovers, and everybody thinks that, you know, well, strongman, you got to have so much more recovery. And we start thinking about deload weeks. Everybody, that's a huge topic, right? Everybody wants to deload their own way. One of the things I learned from listening to football coaches was that they would deload every 4 weeks. And that's generally what I see strongman coaches do.
Pretty typical
But-
periodization. Yeah.
Right. But why do football coaches do that? Because their athletes are not just in the weight room. They're also going to football practice 2-a-days. They're doing so much more CNS intensive stuff. So they need a more reoccurring, a more frequent deload. So I think 5 weeks is good. Sometimes I can go a little further if I insert some tapers and give them like a semi deload where they're not just shutting everything down and coming and firing it back up. So there's a lot of variability, and it depends on the athlete too. But one of the things that strongman has is specificity, because we're not training a bunch of strength exercises to use in a game somewhere that doesn't really have to do with that. You know,
Right.
We're training very specific movements for those movements that we're going to use in a competition.
We'll see what the OSG event survival challenge is.
Oh, I'm psyched about that because we're going to murder that.
Yeah. I do like those kinds of events. I like events where I pick something up and move it.
Isn't that every event, or do you mean moving like
a
mobile event,
like a carry, I guess.
Like a carry,
That's
okay.
to be more specific.
Yeah.
Actual,
I mean, like a strongman,
50
we pick everything up and move it somewhere.
Move something, yeah.
Yep.
Pick
like
things
distance
up and put
carries.
them down.
So sorry.
No, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was like, I think it's always good that more and more events are having that kind of, like OSG did it. I mean, the Clash series of like a lot more moving events and less like focus on just like heavy static things, because I think
Definitely.
it can be like good, because I think one thing recently that I've noticed with the Arnold doing the Wheel of Pain, it just like takes so much out of the athletes. You don't get to see them do as much exciting things otherwise. And I think sometimes you need to find that balance of like doing like those good moving events, so that way you test like the explosiveness and everything, but you're also not like destroying someone's body to the point that they like don't do well at other events or like lower the numbers and everything.
Well, and also just from a pure entertainment perspective, usually those races are some of the most fun to watch too.
Exactly.
So
I agree.
They're exciting. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why I never really got into powerlifting, because I just found, the same 3 lifts, over and over again, boring. I enjoyed the training for it, but
This is why I've said over and over and over again that strongman needs to get to a format. Granted, it's a heavy capital cost, but we need to get to a point where we have single class competitions capped at 10 athletes, 10 lanes, and everything's a race.
Kind of that like CrossFit Games style.
It would be so much more entertaining from the crowd perspective to see everybody competing together, and you could look out on the field and know who's ahead, who's losing, right, where the standings are, so on and so forth. Of course, it would change some of the strategy, because first place isn't going to go last anymore. You're all going to go together, but it adds another layer of strategy, because you should be able to look out on the field and see where the rest of the competitors are, right? I mean, if it's a log for reps, I think there'd have to be some kind of scorekeeping that everybody could see. But yeah, I'm all about that entertainment value perspective, and I would love to see strongman get there.
Yeah, like I saw at the Rogue Invitational, the CrossFit athletes, when they did the log, what was really cool is they had 2 lighter logs that people worked their weight up on. And
Right.
once they passed the heavier weight, then it was like, and there's less athletes left, and you have like center stage on those heavier weights.
Right.
and everything. And it was a nice way of like keeping things moving. And you got to see everyone like the different techniques head to head, because you saw like athletes like miss it and then like watch someone else do something slightly different and they try it, then hit it. You had that like competitiveness of like having an event that wasn't even very long, but still had like 30 guys attempting a log, ran pretty smoothly. Whereas sometimes I think it can be easy to get stuck in this like specific format. Whereas I think I like the head to head things as long as it's not last man standing on stones, which is not an event that I'm a fan of. And I think for some reason that's like the one thing a lot of people do that's like a real head to head.
You mean the back and forth?
Yeah, the back
Until
and
you
forth.
quit. Man, I actually kind of like that stone event.
Like,
I like watching it. I wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah, well, I like it. I like watching it too, but I've been present for some pretty amazing performances in those. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, it's not probably the most entertaining for just the general audience, but yeah, from a personal perspective, I love that. But it would be so much better if you could have like, again, I don't know how you do that head to head, but stones would be tough. But if you had all 10 people going at the same time, man, that would be amazing.
That would be at least multiple lanes, because I like that idea of having these events, because it would take a larger field and stuff. Like you'd have to have more of a stadium to style thing, but they would go faster without that rush for the athletes. Like
you could do a show in like an hour and a half. Well, I think you'd still have to give the athletes time to rest and warm up, so it'd probably still be 2.5 hours. But I mean, at least like a mobile event, like a yoke or something, I think you'd have to make it a little bit longer than 60 feet. But man, if you did it to like total failure, like max distance yoke, all 10 athletes going at the same time.
That's a bad idea.
My CNS just committed suicide hearing that.
Yes. Strongman. I mean, you go and do a deadlift and then a sandbag carry for max, or a Husafeld stone for max distance, and then do stones right after. Your freaking CNS or your posterior chain's destroyed, but you do it anyway.
That's if you think about it, it is more exciting, and it's exciting to see the evolution of the sport, how it's come to that. Because back in the old days, you know, the days of the fat guy that, you know, was strong as he could be standing in one place is over. You know, now you've got athletes. Even the 400-pound guys are athletic. You know,
well, if you guys should go back far enough in strongman, at World's Strongest Man, it used to actually be a lot more on the athletic side. I mean, I mean, back in the early days, they were shoveling rocks into buckets and carrying them back and forth. Right?
My all-time favorite strongman was John Paul Sigmarsson, and that's one of the main reasons. It's just because he was such a phenomenal athlete, and he could beat everybody just with that. You know,
I kind of think strongman kind of does sort of a circular thing, right? I mean, trend wise, kind of always comes back around, but it's always heavier, right? It gets more extreme. I mean, even look back. We need Andrew Clayton here to tell me what year it was when they did the sandbags in the water, right? I mean, that was on the sand into the water. That was an insane.
Yeah, I was going to say that loading event was wild.
Loading event, right? But I mean, it goes right back again to like classic World's Strongest Man. It just got heavier and harder.
Yeah,
and I think that's the actual evolution, right? Is it kind of there's some repetition in the type of events. It just gets heavier and harder.
Yeah, the weights itself, like I remember 2017, I competed in Masters Nationals, and the yoke was 800 pounds, and we thought that was heavy. Yeah, that's nothing now.
That's nothing.
There's like, you know, the pros are walking 1,500-pound yokes, you know, and it's
I remember like a 700-pound yoke was heavy, I think, for U105s, and now they're doing like 950. I think there's probably been 1,000-pound yoke somewhere by now. Yep.
Yeah.
Or even deadlift was like 700-pound deadlift. When I started out, that was an amazing like pro level deadlift, right? Now there's guys pulling over 900.
I remember.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder what the max cap for human potential is, because we've crossed it. I mean, we're definitely superhuman as far as, you know, what we can do. Yeah. As far, you know, as long as, you know, we continue to get smarter with nutrition and training and of course pharmacology,
Sure.
It's just going to continue.
And it's just going to take some of those genetic freaks to prove that it can be done. I mean, 500 kilograms was thought impossible until Eddie Hall did it, right? And then Thor came and did it even easier with 1 kilogram heavier. But and I think a lot of it is just breaking barriers helps the general population, maybe not general population, but the general strength athlete realize that there's more. The human body is capable of a lot more. And you see it even in women's strongman now. These ladies are coming in just like killing numbers that we never thought were possible. And now there's just like this catapult into, the stratosphere with women's world records. And I think it just kind of goes back to that kind of that mental block that people just naturally have, like what is possible. And once they see that it's possible, then other people think, well, if he or she could do that, then I can do that. And the bar just keeps going up and up and up. And up.
Right.
So where is that? The sky's the limit.
I think Rhiannon will probably show us eventually because she's unstoppable, man. It's like every time, what really mystifies me more than anything about her is like her strength, and she's breaking all these records, but the frequency of her competitions is crazy. It's like a couple weeks apart and she's just showing up and dominating. So I definitely got to give her a shout out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that pound for pound power they have is just insane to realize. Like she did the 4.5 times body weight deadlift. And then Dan Benson recently, they did the math and he did 4.49 times his body weight with his thing. And he was like, if I just been slightly lighter, it would have been a clean 4.5 times. But you realize it is that thing of what for years no one could do, like the sub 4-minute mile, and then one guy did it, and the next year you had 20 people do it and stuff. And it is like kind of people don't always kind of think about those things of how much of this sport and sports in general is based on like also mental conditioning. If you go into something thinking I'm not going to do this or I can't do this, you're not going to put the same sort of effort towards it. Like there will be modulation of effort.
It's proof that the hive mind exists, man.
For sure. And if you think about it, we're not talking about muscular performance. We're talking about neuromuscular performance. And I could get into a psychological discussion here if we wanted to, but there's a strong connection of what the human body can do based on what the mind believes and how it perceives, what our performance. Something that I talk to my athletes about is I got one guy, he's an extremely emotional lifter and he uses it very well. So I'm working on harnessing that. But for the most part, I tell people this, you got to shut that down. You shut those emotions down and feed that into your muscles, into your body. And that's what, what fuels you. And that's a rabbit hole you guys probably don't want to go down.
No, there's a great book, and I mentioned it before on here. I love it, and I think more people, especially in the strength world, need to read it. It's Stronger Minds, Stronger Bodies by Randall Strawson. Gets into the psychology of lifting and kind of the mind over matter, the benefit of walking out of the gym without failure, right? The positivity, so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, the mind does play a significant part in your ability to lift or to accomplish incredible feats of strength.
Because that's the main thing is people oftentimes, and we've talked about it before, like that's why you see some people, it's important to be able to perform even if you're not pumped full of adrenaline. And there are a lot of athletes who overuse that of like using smelling salts routinely in training and stuff like that, getting into the parasympathetic nervous system state, like,
fight or flight. I don't want
fight or flight because it makes it so you're not thinking clearly. Like you saw it with the Chaos Classic, like John Hack running so fast with the sandbags he almost hit his teeth on the yoke and stuff. Like you make those little things that like that mistake cost him several points and stuff, and you see it pretty routinely with people kind of overshooting things or like jumping up too fast with like the farmer's carry, and then you don't get a good pick and you drop it halfway. It doesn't matter that you saved a bunch of time with a fast pick, because like at the end of the day, that repick's going to be longer than anything else. So-
Being in that state is a detriment to me because, first of all, you're not thinking, you're in survival mode. So if you're running an implement and you drop the implement, all the deceleration drills that you practiced to stop and turn and move around quickly are out the window because you kept going because you were so amped up.
Yeah.
I mean, that right there is proof in the pudding that
I think there's definitely a time and place for that, though.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're going to go for max effort, single lift, right, deadlift or something, it's great. But yeah, I've been an advocate for a long time to not get psyched up for mobile events. I've seen it like you said, many times. Guys get just too psyched up, and there's a medley carry or something. They're just going so fast, like John Hack did. They stumble and like kick the keg, like rolls down, and they have to go and get it, right? And they just screwed. Like they were going so fast. Like, yeah, you would have done well if you didn't stumble, but you were going too fast because you got too psyched up, probably sniffing, smelling salts. Yeah, I mean, there's a point. I think there's a fine line. I think that fight or flight is good if you're like going for like absolute max effort, low technical skill deadlift. And I'm not saying deadlift's not technical in any form, but it's not like highly technical, right? It's not like an overhead,
There's
like a log press. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's a
less
time
variables.
and place for that. I think. Yeah.
The event that I've noticed that you have to have like the most emotional control and don't get all amped up and excited is a sandbag throw over bar.
Yeah.
Because I've been at the gym before and I was like, I know I can get this, and I get angry and I'm gonna get mad and throw it over hard, and it just gets worse.
It just gets
it gets
worse.
worse and worse
Right.
and worse. So yeah, you just gotta take your time and just make sure you keep the tension and be smart.
That's actually a pretty technical move. Throwing it's very technical.
There's precision involved, and you lose the ability to be precise when you're in that state.
An example too is like the Shaw Classic recently. There was some young woman there who weighed in 165 pounds in clothes, and she has hit a 200-pound log before, but for the medley, it started out and she got super, super hyped up, and she threw the log up and just pressed it so fast it flew behind her and she lost control and couldn't do it again. And it's like one of those things where you realize too, kind of that mindset, once you've missed a lift, it's very hard to recover from something like that, especially with like the energy exertion.
I used to do that habitually early on in strongman, in my very early amateur years. I'd take a bunch of pre-workout, right? I'd get all psyched up and ready to go. The first event was always overhead, and I was always so jittery that it's still not my best event, but man, it was bad back then because I was just all over the place. I couldn't stabilize the lightest weight, doing stuff like that, throwing it behind me. There's a time and place for hype and a time and place for calm and steady, like technical work.
And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like when you get your adrenaline pumping and you're all nervous or you're getting excited, doesn't your body want to pull blood, like pulls it towards your organs more, right? I know your blood pressure will go up, but I always say
so you've got fight or flight and rest and digest. So you're when you're amped up, it's going to pull it away from the organs that you would normally use for digestion.
So I guess you got to get the right type of right type of excitement.
Well,
I have tried to amp myself up a little bit. Like sometimes I'm like, it feels like maybe you just don't have the blood pressure in your arms you need to get if you're not in the right mindset.
Right. So I mean, there's two instances where people accomplish unbelievable feats of strength, right? One is during fight or flight, right? When there is an extreme situation of survival, right? There's lots of examples of people accomplishing just unbelievable strengths of feet, right? A mother's child is under a car, something like she'll lift that car up to get the child out from under it, something she could never have done any other time, right? And the other is basically just being really like insanely psyched out. So it has its benefit when it comes to lifting because, again, that fight or flight, I mean, there's lots of scenarios and examples where people do unbelievable feats of strength for survival reasons. But yeah, I think when it comes to strongman with so much variety and in events, you definitely need to tap into that under the right circumstances, Not all
that you nailed it right there.
circumstances.
The right circumstances, and those circumstances being harnessed
Yeah.
properly. I mean, we can talk about different cultures that are practice unitary ecstatic states, like the Viking berserkers were a perfect example.
Dude, let's
of,
talk about that. We need to
let's.
talk about
Okay.
Viking berserkers.
All right, I can actually tell you a good bit about those. Men that would. Some people said that they would use drugs. Some people said that there was a religious experience, something that they used, that they created a unitary ecstatic state. So they were ecstatic in their bodies, but their minds were basically possessed. And when if you read the lore, it sounds like possessed by an entity, possessed by a god or something like that. But science tells us they were possessed by their subconscious. And their subconscious is what is programmed to allow them to accomplish crazy feats. There's stories about them getting cut and not bleeding, and it says Odin's men went into battle, and neither fire nor steel can hurt them. I get chills every time I say that. But I mean, there's a lot to that. A good account of that was the movie Lone Survivor. One of the SEALs that was attacked by the Taliban, they thought he was dead, and after they went back to get all the bodies, they found his body that had been moved like 3 different times, and they found brass in all these different spots, and he had been damaged so severely they thought he was dead, and he got up again and fought some more, and got up again and fought some more. And it's because personally, I think it's that unitary ecstatic state. When you're in that mode, you can do phenomenal things. How does that carry over to strongman? I don't know. I'm not that good yet.
We just need some really, really good drugs, is what you're saying.
Yeah, Amita muscaria, that mushroom. Yeah.
Eat some mushrooms before you can meet. No. Yeah, I mean, there's the human body is definitely capable of incredible things. It's just like you said, like being able to tap and harness that state at the right time and applying it. It's easier said than done, of course.
Sure.
Yep. But I know it's like you brought up Viking lore. I did stalk your Instagram a little bit, and I saw that you had a Volknut on your chest.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, you guys talked about that a little bit with one of Tyler's episodes where I was an Odinist,
yes,
for lack of a better term.
Yes,
I think he thought you were Wiccan, and I was like, no, am I not Wiccan?
well, I saw the Volknut, and I obviously, yeah. So I got to know more about this, because I really appreciate Viking lore, and I've listened to quite a lot of I can't say his name off the top of my head. Very, very well known author on Viking mythology, but I find it fascinating.
So let me first go on record saying that I've been on this path for well over 2 decades, well before anybody put out a series or anything like that thousands of people just got on that bandwagon.
Dude, The Last Kingdom is my favorite TV series.
It's so much better than Vikings, right?
So much better,
man.
So much better.
Team Uhtred.
Fuck yeah. Yes. And also Magnus Samuelsson is on it, so
yeah, you can't go wrong there.
Can't go wrong there.
So yeah, it's been a huge part of my life for over 2 decades. It's a path that I found, and it's very closely tied in with my ancestry. It's one of the things that connected me to strongman actually as a child. Like I said, the first time I saw, I mentioned John Paul Sigmarsson. The first time I saw him compete, there was like this feeling of connection, and we call that cultural resonance. It's just like when the first time I saw a rune, I felt like I've seen it 1,000 times before when I've never seen it a day in my life. Same thing with him. When I saw him compete, there was something there that connected me to that. And I realized later on in life that was my ancestry. And, certain events that brought me down the path to research that eventually led me to what I now call Germanic paganism, because it goes well beyond just the Viking age or the Scandinavian countries. I mean, the entire Germanic tribes all through Europe practice the same spiritual beliefs.
Right.
the Vikings may have called him Odin, where the Germanic tribes might have called him
Odin.
Wotan. The Anglo-Saxons might have said Woden. It just depends on where you were, but they're all talking about the same God. And he's he's definitely the god of inspiration, and one of his many nicknames is Stir to Fury, and that's where that whole unitary ecstatic state thing comes in. Something that I've practiced in martial arts, but never in strength.
Well, I've read that people that adorn the Volknut die bloody and horrendous deaths, but gloriously.
It's
glorious and horrendous death.
Yeah, it's funny because when I put it out over my heart, everybody made the joke where it's insert Gungnir here, Gungnir being Odin's spear.
Yeah.
And that is very true. There was a time when it was like only certain people would get a Volknut. And I'm not saying that I've seen people get a tattoo, taken off them with a hot spoon, but you didn't just do it. You kind of knew better. You know what I mean? Yeah. So when I put that over my heart, I knew very well what I was doing.
I mean, you're tempting fate a little bit, I think.
Absolutely. But at the same time, if you think about the Odinic perspective, he wants, here's Odin's plan. He wants the best people for his army, the Einherjar, to fight for him at Ragnarok. So that's who goes to Valhalla, the Einherjar. So the Odinist, us, or the ODN, depending on how you want to call us, it's two different perspectives. Our job is to continue to progress, to continue to ascend. As long as we're getting better, he looks at us like, he's not there yet. He's not there yet. He's not at his best yet. Okay, now I'll take him. So it's a game. We're continuing to try to better ourselves and ascend to our highest human potential. And, that's a lot of people say that's how a lot of the gods became gods, that they were once humans and they eventually just ascended to godhood. It's written about in the sagas where Odin is waiting for Eric Bloodaxe, he's waiting with Eric Bloodaxe for another king of Norway to join them in Valhalla as a god form himself. So there's a lot of ancestor worship. The ancestors are looked at as gods too, or at the very least direct conduits to the gods.
Right.
So
the Valhalla is not the only field of
there's
warriors.
There's
right?
different afterlife schemes, and depending on who you ask, some people say that Valhalla didn't exist, that it was a consolation prize later thought up as to get warriors to fight. But there's if you really start to look at like consciousness and what is source consciousness and how we apply our cultural bias to that, what exists is what we believe. Carl Jung talked about the riverbed theory. As somebody believes something, it's a trickle in a riverbed. As more people start to believe in it, it becomes a raging river. So the fact that people have believed that a Valhalla exists for thousands and thousands of years, and we're also taught not to really dwell a whole lot on the afterlife because we've got so much here to do, and everything we do here is what directly affects that. But the lore does state that there's different realms in the afterlife, a realm for unwed mothers. There's Frigga's Hall, that like people who die at sea go to Njord or Ran. So there's definitely a bunch of different places.
Sure.
And hell, I call that the recycling bin of the souls, because hell spelled with one L, it's not a bad place.
Right.
It's where you go to rest, and eventually you're brought back, reincarnated, to try again.
Right.
Then they talk about
hell is Loki's daughter, right?
Right. Hela is Loki's daughter.
Yeah. Hell
is her realm. And then there's Niflheim or Niflhel, that's considered a bad place where usually
what's where the
traders
giants reside, is it not?
No, that's Jotunheim.
Jotunheim, that's right.
Yeah. Or Muspelheim, depending on which type of giant, which giants are unconscious forces of nature. Let's not like try to look at things in fairy tale lenses on. our ancestors understood that unconscious forces of nature existed, and the best way that they could describe them was through these different stories and myths. So when when a storm would rage and destroy all the crops, and then there was such a huge thing in those lands at that time because everything was so hard, it would kill so many people. Well, they had to blame that on something, and they blamed that on a giant, on a Jotun. Now, does that mean that they don't exist? No, because everything in nature, if you're an animist, you believe everything in nature has a spirit, has a soul. It's just unconscious. It doesn't mean to be destructive. It just is.
That's interesting you say that, because I feel that way about like wolves is a good example. Like, it always drives me nuts that people want to kill all the wolves, or even like out here in Colorado we have no, I can't even say what the hell they're called. They're like giant gophers, prairie dogs. And people want to kill them all, right? And it's like, well, they're just doing what they do. Like, they don't intend to be evil, or they're not out trying to just kill all of your livestock just because. They're doing it because they're hungry, right? That's what they do. They don't deserve to die just because of that. And the same with prairie dogs. Like, there's all these, like, I think they're kind of bullshit myths that, well, like, if there's prairie dogs in a pasture, the horses are going to break their legs. And I'm like, you ever rode a horse? They don't just like walk around and run with their eyes to the sky, right? They know where they're going.
Yeah.
They're not just going to like randomly step in a hole. I mean, if it's covered and they can't see it, maybe, but
people need an excuse for what they do.
People always have an excuse for what they do. And yeah, I don't know, just what you said kind of reminded me of that. Like, I'm always that way about animals. Like, they're just doing what they do. Like, they're not intentionally destructive.
Who has destroyed the earth more than any other, species? Humans. Yep. So when somebody comes along and stamps us out, that makes them the bad guy? No, right. We deserve it.
Probably. We probably do. I mean, that's true. But I just I don't think the animals do, because they're not even self-aware, right? They're just doing what they do. They're doing what nature has taught them to do, what evolution has, instructed them to do, or whatever, however you want to phrase that.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
But I'm like I'm a big outdoorsman, and I used to hunt, and like I fish a lot now, and I have strange. It's not strange, I guess, in today's day and age, or where I live now. Where I grew up, it was strange to have like compassion for animals, right? I've always kind of been that way. When they put on the ballot in Colorado to reintroduce wolves in the northwest part of the state, I was like, no, not because I hated wolves, because I knew that the ranchers are just going to kill them.
Yep. I hear a lot of people talk about the necessity of hunting of wolves, and and one of the things that I get, it triggers me, and not much does, but it emotionally triggers me when I see the aerial hunting of wolves, because it's such a huge act of cowardice. It's interesting that we've ended up on this conversation, because I have a wolf pelt, okay, and it was hanging beside me before we started this podcast, and I moved it because I was like, it'll come up in conversation. They're going to be like, "What the hell?" Then I might have to explain it. But now I'm not
opposed to hunting. I don't want to I'm not
me neither.
Like a tree hugger or anything, but
no. But
I have a very strong sense of ethics when it comes to it. I mean, morals.
I think that wolves, like certain animals, like wolves, they're majestic, and they have a purpose. And they're encroaching on our land. Well, maybe we encroached on theirs first. So a while back, I thought of getting a wolf pelt because of the Ofednar, the wolf coat type of berserker, for spiritual practice, and I had a huge moral issue because I could not bring myself to do it, because I knew the wolf had most likely been hunted, and
hunted for its fur.
Yeah. And it took me a while, and then I realized, it's like, well, if I don't get it, somebody else will. If I get it, I'll make it sacred. I'll give it worth again. Give it, its life in its death would mean something. So that's it right here.
No, I mean, I appreciate that, because I think you're right. Probably back in the dark ages of when the Vikings were prominent, berserkers probably went out and it was a spiritual process and quest to kill the wolf that they wore, right? Nowadays,
Right.
it's a mindless, just killing field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the animal was honored. It was given, you know, a sacred need. So
Right. And they probably
there's
killed
just-
it with a spear versus, you know, from a helicopter.
right.
with
They
a
were
rifle.
in danger
with a high-powered
Yeah.
stone.
from a helicopter. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just such a bitch move to me, man. I can't
I
help
agree.
it.
I agree 100%. Yeah, no, I'm glad we talked about that because I mean, that's a big deal to me.
Yep.
I don't know. I have nothing against hunting. I don't even, you know,
I've
I try to
hunted.
not. Yeah, I've hunted a lot too, and I think from a like when it comes to trophy hunting, I'm a little like, you know,
Yeah.
it sucks.
I'm with you.
But sometimes like trophy hunters, you know, even in Africa, they're doing it because it actually helps with conservation. They give the meat to poor communities that really need it. So I mean, there's a positive, a silver lining anyway. But there are those people that just go out to kill, and yeah, I hate that.
No. Yeah, that's not supporting that at all. Hunting to me, the is a sacred event. It's something that should be done ritually, you know. And we see that even it's carried on today with the father that takes his son out for the first hunt, kills his first deer, and they put the blood on the face. You know, that came from somewhere. That's something that's been passed down. So
for sure. Yeah, and I mean, even if you're not an Odinist or, you know, any kind of quote unquote pagan religion, and I'm saying quotes because that's a very Christian term.
Right.
But any religion, I mean, it can still be a spiritual and respectful process to harvest animals, you know, and understanding that life is precious and you are taking a precious life, right? That will no longer enjoy. I mean, you're taking everything from it. So, yeah, it's a tough process. That's a tough topic.
Yeah, I'm not real big into killing animals. I guess that's just not my thing. But I think I heard something that made a lot of sense with kind of what you're talking about with adding value to those big game animals like in Africa, because over there, you know, that black rhino or whatever, that's annoying. It goes through little villages and annoys them. But if you have Americans who'll come over and pay $800,000 to hunt it, well, now they're going to do conservation and they're going to make sure that valuable resource is protected. I listened to a podcast about that and how it helps numbers of, I guess, endangered animals over there because they're so valuable. And then they pick the one that has to be harvested, you know?
Right.
So I guess like it's kind of like it seems like a bad thing, but I guess it serves a purpose.
It does.
Sure,
And,
I mean,
yeah, I'm kind of like I always think about. I've been thinking about hunting again, because meat is becoming expensive, and the quality of beef in the U.S. is not great because it's, you know, corn finished and whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, there's probably so much of it goes to waste in the grocery stores. The way it is, like if everybody that has the same mindset as me goes and starts hunting, we're just killing more animals while other animals are going to waste. So it's like this tough ethical dilemma for me.
I think the funniest thing I saw years ago is the church I grew up in. There were several people there who are vegans or vegetarians, and like they would get stuff that had meat in it at like fellowship meal, and they would take the meat out and throw it out. And I was like, that's literally just going straight to waste. Like that's not like stopping anything. And I think oftentimes, the important thing is for people to do everything you do of acting intentionally, of like a lot of times, like especially hunting years ago and stuff was like nose to tail of like these days organs are pretty cheap, stuff like that, but these days oftentimes it is because now everyone just wants chicken wings and everything. Liver King.
That guy.
I mean, I would probably not eat just any liver from anywhere. I would want to know that my butcher is processing the animal in a clean facility. He knows what he's doing, that there's no contamination. Man, eating raw liver, that's just
You think we should add the Liver King as my nutritionist coach?
No. Maybe with a
No,
slide
I mean-
of D-ball.
I just got that certification. Remember, we don't need him.
Bull testicles
I mean, there's
for
nothing
breakfast.
wrong with liver, right? I mean, eat liver. I just would not recommend eating raw liver from just anywhere.
It's true.
No,
like the grocery store, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, go to a butcher that you know, or you're processing it yourself, right? That you know that it's being collected in as clean of an environment as possible. Because when you get into organs, there's a lot of bacteria that can get cross contaminated into other organs, especially from the stomach and the digestive tract. And I would not trust. I mean, even hamburger. I will eat a hamburger like medium rare or medium, right? But if I don't know where it's processed at, I'm a little bit more wary because when you start to like grind stuff up, man, there's a lot of surface area in there to be contaminated,
Yep.
right? And so you got to know your butcher. You got to know the source very well and trust them, or do it yourself. And I guess, yeah, again, my point is I just think that Liver King was so just irresponsible, telling people just go start eating raw liver without knowing where 90% of it comes from.
Here's my thing that there's a lot of dishonesty that goes along with that whole push. If you like liver, if you want to eat liver, it's a nutrient source just like anything else.
Sure.
But don't believe that it's going to enhance the health of your liver because you eat it, because that's what they're saying. Just like all the other organs that they say will enhance the health of this and that, the other thing. No,
your body doesn't work that way.
No, it's if you eat something, there's a protein, a carbohydrate, and a fat, and that's what you're getting. And those things are digested, and it's not going to change anything that's...
And your body's going to use it how it decides to use it, whether your mind wants it to do one thing or another. It's the same with, people trying to go and shed the belly fat, right? Well, your body's going to shed fat how it sheds fat. And it might be belly fat last. Sorry, but that's the way your body works.
Usually how it works, yeah.
Yep. You can't target fat loss.
No.
It was funny though, like seeing all the supplements that are branded like that, of like bull testicles will help like your testicles, like brain will help your brain. I'm like, I mean, that's like a weird old-timey way of thinking of things.
So I'm a huge fan of Lane Norton, and every time he tears apart Paul Saladino, I'm just like, yes, because that's he's one of the biggest culprits, and it's so unfortunate that anybody will find one little thing that somebody says and then blow that up to support their agenda, not truth, just their agenda. Like there might be a fraction of truth in what they're saying, but because it supports their agenda, they push that as the entire truth, and that's what he does. And there's a ton of people out there that are doing it. And one of the things that I don't understand, and I see this a lot in strongman too, is people cling to these fad diets and these trends and everything like that. I had a guy recently that came to me and asked me about intermittent fasting, for a strongman. And I'm like, I mean, if you want to lose weight, you can use it as a control, because you're going to shorten your eating window. You'll probably reduce your caloric intake, but autophagy occurs in a caloric deficit, whether you're fasting or not. That's proven. That's a fact.
Right.
It's undisputable. You all the other things that they say that happen when you fast are just it's bullshit is what it comes down to. And when you're training for a strength sport, the last thing you want to do is restrict your calories, unless you're already strong and you're cutting. You're trying to make weight or something like that. There are certain instances, of course. So it's super unfortunate. It's just like the vegan, push with the Game Changers documentary, and they had that one guy that broke all these world records that nobody heard of until that documentary came out.
Right. No, I'd heard of that guy long time ago, and I can't say his name off the top of my head right now, but
me neither.
I mean, he's some German vegan guy that has been trying to succeed in strongman for many, many years and never got anywhere. Right. No. And then they used him in that documentary, and it's ridiculous.
Because the main thing is it's all a push of I think
if you eat enough D-ball, you could probably be vegan.
But that's the main thing of like having solid nutrition is huge. And I think people don't always realize like the reason the Impossible Burger is pushed over a regular grass-fed beef burger is the profit margins on that beef burger are not nearly what they are on like plant-based foods. Like like a thing of tofu, a pound of tofu is like anywhere from $8 to $12, and it literally costs them like pennies to make and stuff. It's not, and that thing is people don't always realize like you have to think about like where things come from. Of like years ago, it would have been like ethanol was the big push to replace fossil fuels, and then they did the math, and you'd have to literally everything would have to just be cornfields. And monocropping is actually worse for the environment than a lot of other things. Of like, I think people don't always realize that part of like we talked about it with strongman, and like you want to try to look at the whole picture. Most of like, I'd say kind of like you touched on saying of like these fad diets and stuff is people, they look at everything with a microscope. They'll be like, oh, intermittent fasting. They're like looking at this piece and they're like, there is weight loss there. And it's like, yeah, because you've just shortened your window. You only eat for 8 hours a day or whatever. Like
people are always looking for the easy path, right? They're always looking for that magic bullet to make everything easy and make it make sense. And I think for most people that haven't had a lot of experience, right, necessarily going through various phases of dieting and trial and error, that looks really easy because it makes sense, right? Well, if I don't eat for a period of time, clearly I'm going to lose weight because I'm not consuming anything. But going back to what you said, Chris, it's just a caloric deficit, and the converse of that is that science has proven too now that eating 6 meals in a day has no real bearing on your caloric intake versus eating 3, right? If the caloric intake is the same, it's the same. It doesn't really change anything. But people look at that and they're like, oh, well, it's working for this person, so it's probably gonna work for me, or it becomes sort of the umbrella concept that bodybuilders still eat 6-7 times a day, right? Because they do,
and there is a benefit to that. It's TEF, the thermal effect of food. Every time that you eat, you experience a thermal effect of food. Your metabolism does raise. Now, is it so effective that it makes a huge difference? Probably not. But to me, it's eating 3 times a day, 2 protein shakes. You need to get your macros somehow. And by eating more frequently, you can do that. I think that became more of a trend in bodybuilding.
I think you're right. When you're eating 6,000 calories a day, it's pretty tough to get in 3 meals.
Sure. But then we have the internet, and that's probably the biggest problem, because you have all these people. For every Lane Norton, you have 100 Paul Saladinos. For every one guy that's out there trying to tell the truth, and let's be honest, the truth is not sexy. The truth is not, pumped up with trend and, hitting PRs all the time. The truth is what it is, but it's the truth. Everybody looks to see the cool stuff. What are the trend twins doing? I didn't even want to give those guys credit. But there's all these.
Wait, is this a real thing?
Yeah, the trend twins are a real thing.
Yes.
Yeah, they're a duo that. Yeah.
Since I started working in a commercial gym, I have seen so much garbage, man. Oh my God. And it's all from the internet. You know what I mean? Every woman that's up against the wall doing barbell hip thrusts that have never tried a Romanian deadlift or the hundreds of others. Exercises that are going to build your glutes way better. It's the internet. It's sexy. This is what you should do. Just don't make eye contact.
Just don't make.
And that's the main thing. Is oftentimes like, especially with the internet, is people are just buying things from people who, if you look at their history, they've always just been genetically gifted people who they're like, this is how I got to be here. It's like almost all of these people are selling supplements. None of them use the supplements they're selling to get to the point that they're at.
I'm so glad you said that. I have so many people that come up to me and like, hey, I'm running this new squat program. It's called Jacheo. And I'm like,
well, that's not
you've been lifting. Yeah. I'm like, well, you've been lifting for 6 months. right? And I'm like, do you think that that's the program he was running when he was in his 6th month of lifting? Fuck no. You know, you need to get down to basic linear periodization and build strength, and then, you know, eventually move up to more complex programs.
I don't think
But
there's enough
because
trend in the world for me to get through a Shako program.
yeah, no, it just popped in my head because somebody recently came to me with that.
Yeah, it's like people's obsession with Bulgarian.
Sorry,
training.
I just like I get what you're saying though. Yeah, somebody jumping on the most extreme program, you know, and again, it becomes cookie cutter at that point anyway. It wasn't designed for that athlete.
Sure. Right.
And they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing Shako because that's what everybody on the internet says you should be doing. And it's like, that's probably not even close to anything you need.
I was looking back to some of my early programs when I first started strongman with you, and yeah, it was like way simpler. It's just a, a couple core exercises, a few accessories, like 3 times a week, and we got
because my knowledge base was simple, so I kept it simple. I didn't try anything, extreme because I didn't know if that worked. Once I understood something worked and I understood how it worked, I would apply that, so it's.
And then as you look at my programs, like, it gets more and more complex, I guess, as I go on.
Well, Tyler is probably one of the reasons, if I am a good coach right now, he's one of the main reasons I am, because he has advanced so much that I had no choice. I was like, okay, this guy's, going way beyond what I've written for him. I've got to learn more. And so, that's one of the reasons that, like, recently, like when he won world, OSG, I'm like, where do we go next? There was one guy that I coached, and I got him really, really good on a local level, went to nationals and did well. And I second guessed myself, which I tend to do. And I said to him, hey, look, I think I brought you as far as I can. Let me turn you over to my coach. And I felt like the right thing to do. And it probably was for him. So when Tyler got to that point, I was, the same thing crossed my mind, but I was like, no. I was like, because Tyler's committed and he does exactly what I tell him to do. He's the most coachable person I've ever come across. So to me, it was an opportunity for me to grow, and I was like, okay, I've got to keep up with this guy. The better he gets as an athlete, the better I have to get as a coach. So I can really, thank you for, getting me to where I am, just like vice versa.
I told you had a talent for it though. So. But if somebody's out looking for a coach, like, number one, you have to be coachable. And I have Jeremy Shell's going to compete in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited about that. So he was a Marine, and I feel like I'm coaching a Marine every week. Like, he's just boom, there's the program, he executes it. If he ever has any issues, he'll tell me what the issue was or something. We adapt, but he's he treats it like religiously, follows it.
I think that's important. Of like, people always ask, like, what's the best program or what's the best diet? It's like, the best diet is the one that you can stick to and that's sustainable. Like, so many people are like, I'll do this, and realistically, a lot of times, I think, for one, we have an obesity epidemic in this country and everything, like, which is one of our biggest problems, which we didn't do anything to address over the past few years, but that's its own thing. But people, a lot of these fitness influencers, they complicate things, because realistically, for most people, find a diet that just you can do that's lower calories than you're outputting. And for a lot of people, if you don't have money for a gym membership, a lot of public parks have workout areas. There are low cost things, and so many people, it's interesting in their minds, they'll think like, oh, you look at an elite athlete and you're like, I want to get to where they are, so I'm going to run the same program. And so many athletes do that. Like, that's the crazy thing, is now every athlete, it's the same app, just shrink wrapped, branded for them specifically, but they'll be like, run the same program as Martins is running. It's like, are you Martins? Like, maybe you don't run Martins' program if you don't have that, like, you're not going to the same goals.
If the app isn't giving you an onboarding questionnaire and then analyzing that and writing your program, the app sucks. And no app. And so to me, all apps suck compared to individualized programming by an experienced coach.
Have you ever read, like, what Mariusz Pudzianowski, what his training regimen and diet would be?
All I remember is he drank a lot of malted milk. That's
Yeah, I mean, he eats candy all day. So like
candy all day, dude. So do I, man. I'm crazy. I love candy, man. I eat so much sugar. It's stupid.
But then you look at his training regimen, like he's doing more strength training than most strongmen do. Then after that, he's like doing karate and then swimming in a swimming pool laps. So
right. Well, he's burning a lot of calories, right? And when you do, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like I was at a global gym recently, and I just got done doing some like just crazy intense. I might have been doing Zerchers or deadlifts. I can't remember. Maybe both. I think I actually squatted and then deadlifted. And I wasn't done training yet, but I pulled out some like Reese's peanut butter cups, man, and just started eating them, right? And I overheard like this guy, like he was looking at me, but he says to his partner, he's like, "Candy? I would never have guessed he would be eating candy." And I'm like, why wouldn't I be eating candy? It's freaking simple carbohydrates.
Right.
My body's insulin sensitive, and my freaking glycogen levels are fucking crashed. Why would I not be eating high glycemic carbohydrates right now? But people like the average person doesn't really understand that. And so, like, I mean, going back to Pujanowski, that's why he's probably consuming a lot of candy, because he's burning a shitload of calories. Yeah. He's burning a shitload of like his glycogen stores are always empty. And I mean, his body, I mean, if he's working out that much, his body's insulin sensitive, which is the prime time to be consuming those kind of carbohydrates for replenishment and restoration. So
yeah, definitely. And I think the ATP is something that's really misunderstood by a lot of athletes, because when you start to looking at like you're talking about glycogen and how it's used in the body, that's why you get a lot of these athletes, they talk about being on low carb diets and keto, and I'm like, you're killing yourself. You're just killing yourself.
Absolutely.
Pujanowski, I think that there's certain people out there like him who have just such incredible genetics, and not just in performance, but like their ability to digest things efficiently. And then you add the pharmacology to that. They're just going to dominate, no matter what.
It was the dominator.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yep.
I mean, dude, he always looked the best. I mean, he's hands down still physique wise the best physique in strongman.
I think his physique's even better than like bodybuilding physiques, because I don't know, like bodybuilding physique, sometimes you look at it and it doesn't look like
modern bodybuilding physique.
I'm thinking of
you go back to like the silver era, gold
you're right
era
about that.
bodybuilding. Yeah, those guys had better physiques. Now it's just like
utility. Like if you're gonna be that big, like I like to see like a certain level of, I can imagine that like performing like some amazing feats. And like Mariusz Pujanowski was big like a bodybuilder, but you could tell his body had utility. Like he was an athlete.
Franco Colombo was a bodybuilder, competed in worlds. He's perfect example of somebody who could be a bodybuilder and also athletic. Then you hear stories. I remember hearing stories about Ronnie Coleman, that he had this thing where he liked to like take his rocking chair out to the water in his beach house, and he would walk and have to stop, catch his breath, walk, stop again, catch his breath, and then finally sit down and relax. I mean, that speaks volumes.
Right. Well, I mean, modern bodybuilders, I mean, there's some very strong bodybuilders. Obviously, Ronnie Coleman was very statically strong. Stan Efferding is very strong. There's one more guy out there that I can't think of his name. But there's some very strong bodybuilders. But yeah, for the most part, they're just like growing themselves like cattle to slaughter, right? And as much mass and muscle mass as possible that's not super functional.
And you'll talk, like they always talk of, so many of these people want like the V taper and stuff, like Matt Frazier, who ended up going on to win a bunch of CrossFit games and stuff. You'll look at like Pujanowski and those people, you have a thick core. You do still have a V taper, but it's interesting that now you'll look at like a lot of bodybuilders will talk about like, here's how to work your legs without making your core thicker. Like, don't do squats, do the hack squats. Don't do this because you don't want a thick core. And it's like, your thick core is your center of power and everything. Like that weird, almost unnatural V taper of some of these guys will talk about, like a 32-inch waist, and then like the top of them's like 50 inches or something. You're like,
that's the difference between an athlete. I mean, your lumbopelvic hip complex is the support of your entire body. If you've got, a strong lumbo-pelvic hip complex, which that's the right way of calling the core. Everybody thinks core is just abs and lower back. It has so much more than that. If you've got that strong and thick and wide, you're going to have a base that's unstoppable. There was I think it was Stan Efferding that was talking about, he did a seminar on, and there was a bodybuilder that was huge, and he was like, hey, try not to let me fold you. And he pushed him over, and the guy just fell like really, really quick. And everybody was just like, what the hell? And he was a perfect example of the guy just didn't have a strong core because he had, like you said, a 32-inch waist.
But he looked good on stage.
To be like 300 pounds and like have the same, because some of them talk about now trying to get the proportions where your waist is almost the same diameter as your thighs. It's like you need a real thick core if you're going to have that much muscle mass on you.
You remember when I did the Forge 2 competition, so every once in a while, like once a year, I'll do a heavyweight competition. And we had to carry, it was a 960-pound yoke, and it was built like a car built around it. And so I picked it up and took it like 10 feet and dropped it, picked it up and dropped it, and eventually made it to 50 feet. And I think only a few people even finished it. So I got decent points. But then one guy picked it up and took it down in like 14 seconds, or it was less than that. And I remember you'd text me, Jacheo would text me, and he goes, I think they made an error on somebody's time because it was so fast, so much faster than everybody else's. And this guy he came in third. I came in second in the competition. This guy came in third. And he was like as tall as me, and I was like on the second floor. He was like taller than me. But his hips were, if you look at my hips next to his hips were at least 3 of mine. It was like 3 times as wide. And he's like, yeah, I've just always been good at yoke. I was like, yeah, it's because your hips are like that wide.
It's typical. Guys that do really well at yoke typically are just thick in the midsection. Yep.
And that's the crazy thing. Like Hooper with his like super speedy runs that he does and everything. But he also talks about, it's interesting because he doesn't do that much like cryo and crazy things people do for recovery. He talks about like the power of movement. Like so many people don't realize that, what is it? Just walking 10 minutes a day reduce your chances of being hospitalized with COVID by 80%, regardless of your health like circumstances. Like they said that technically you can smoke cigarettes, and as long as you're physically active, you'd actually live longer than someone who seems more fit but like doesn't get movement and stuff. Like it's pretty consistent that like movement helps you a lot, but we don't emphasize that very much.
I couldn't agree more. When I switched careers at one point from I was a ship fitter on a ship and took a desk job, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to recover so much better from training. And it was the exact opposite. And it wasn't until I realized that and started implementing moving into my day. And it was just like you said, 10-minute walks. Every time I ate something, I did a 10-minute walk. And, the bosses didn't like that all that much, but whatever.
Yeah, I'm the same, man. My hips and my low back get so tight because I have a desk job and I have got to move around. Otherwise, I'm just so stiff all the damn time.
Yep.
And you could feel it, like your hamstrings get tight, the chair's uncomfortable, like all these things.
Psoas is just always like, that's what it is more than anything for me.
And we're built for movement.
For me.
Yeah, like I have my kneeling chair. I like it because it just keeps my core engaged, and it's been like nice. Because honestly, like the normal office chairs just feel really unpleasant after a while, and I like just being able to like sit. And it's interesting, but you think of a lot of times they'll say, it's those little things that you don't realize that can help the most with weight loss. If you think a lot of people, they'll like go insane at the gym and everything, but if you're not moving in the rest of your life, like that can be the difference of like those little calories that you burn, and like that recovery makes a huge difference. Because at this point, they've done so many studies, like smoking's at an all-time low, fat consumption's at an all-time low, and obesity is as high as ever, and our lifespans are actually decreasing. And stuff, which is crazy to think that like all these things now, if people talk about like getting your fats from like plant-based rather than animal-based, your body processes those things differently. And like the way, like a lot of times people don't think of like the whole picture of this idea of like keep moving, think about what you're eating and everything. And oftentimes people have these like, they'll pick out this one thing of like, oh, like this is fat-free yogurt. And it's like there's 44 grams of sugar in that yogurt. Like that yogurt's not actually like the healthy
Give me the
little
fat any
snack.
day.
Yeah,
the fat
and
any day. Exactly.
You see it all the time with like dairy products and stuff. They'll be like, "Oh, it's fat free," and then you're like, an 8-ounce glass of fat free milk, depending on what brand you do, can have like 20 grams of sugar for some reason, or like these things where you're like, that's not helping you.
Well,
And
fat.
it's like,
Well, and that's the myth, though, that the fake fitness industry. Well, I mean, the part of the fitness industry that spreads misinformation, right? Or even the USDA, the FDA, CDC, like they all spread misinformation about what is healthy and what's not when it comes to food, right? And fat has been on the for some reason has been a target for all of these government agencies and in the fitness industry for decades now. Your body needs to have fat, like especially saturated fat. You literally cannot live without saturated fat. Trying to cut it out makes no sense, right? And avoidance, again, is stupid, right? Because at the end of the day, again, I mean, you probably shouldn't be consuming massive amounts of trans fats, but trans fats exist in nature too. If you're consuming dairy, you're getting some trans fats. You can't stop consuming them completely, right? It really boils down more to your caloric intake and level of activity.
Right. And I mean, people do better with, some people do better with fats than others. Personally, I know that when I start doing my macros, if I get below 100 grams of fat in the course of a day, I start to feel bad. My joints hurt.
Same.
So I have to up them. Carbohydrates. Everybody's people go through phases of what they're going to demonize. For the longest time it was fat, and then it became carbs. Everybody's like, carbs are bad. I'm like, these are things that your body works off of. Right. Now it's protein because everybody wants you to stop eating meat. Well, that's great, but you're going to stop building muscle.
Here's the thing, though. Like, fat and protein are essential nutrients. Carbohydrates are not.
Right.
Right. So you can live without carbohydrates. You cannot live without fat or protein.
Correct.
Period.
But it's that absurd idea. The main issue is years ago they decided that everything was a food pyramid, and now people have realized, like, realistically you need a bit of everything. And it's interesting because rather than realize it's dumb to just have a food pyramid where you're like, these things you can have tons of, this you have almost none of. It's like it should be more holistic, almost like a pie chart where things are evenly matched.
And that's probably part of the reason that there's an obesity epidemic, though, too. Is I mean, carbs aren't bad necessarily, right? But high glycemic carbohydrates in surplus while you're in a sedentary state aren't good for you, right? That's why, because your body is pumping all that glycogen into fat cells rather than muscle cells, right? And that's why people become obese, because they're consuming super high glycemic carbohydrates while they're sitting on their ass all day, not active, and they end up with insulin sensitivity issues, diabetes, etc. So carbohydrates aren't bad per se, but the way that they have been ascribed or prescribed even in the United States for decades is ass backwards.
Yep. Charles Poliquin was one that said you have to earn your carbohydrates, and I fully believe that. If you don't need them, then yeah, sure, you can go without them, like you said. But if you're a performance athlete, you definitely need carbohydrates.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
That's true. I was realizing usually Darren's the one to say it, that we try to keep things about an hour, because I was realizing, I was like,
it's been a good conversation.
We went all over the place.
Yeah.
Which is great.
When I first met Darren in Finland, for some reason, when I was first talking to you, I was like, he reminds me a lot of my coach, Jacheo. And so this is kind of like, I wanted to get y'all talking to each other, because I thought y'all would probably like be of the like mind and kind of hit it off. And it seems like, y'all very similar in your ways of thinking about.
Well, cool, man. Maybe we'll actually do it in person one day over a couple beers, and
hell yeah, dude, that'd be awesome. I would love that.
Say some real cool shit.
Hell yeah, we can say real cool shit on here. Don't
for sure. Yeah, no, not me.
Well, yeah. Let's wrap it up. I mean, it was a pleasure having you back on, Tyler. Pleasure meeting you, Chris. Having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Any final words before we go? I mean, this is your time to, do a ladder pitch, whatever you got, where people can find you on the socials or whatnot?
I'm on Instagram, chaos_strength_Jacheo. If you're interested in coaching, you can contact me, or you can go through Chaos Strength's website and email them. Anywhere on social media. I'm working on getting a lot more exposure on social media. It's hard for me. I don't do it as well as I used to, but yeah. And if I have anything to take away from this, is to do your research on your coach. It doesn't have to be me. It could be anybody. Do your research. Make sure that they have a good track record. It's just like if you go to get a tattoo, you want to look at the guy's portfolio. Make sure that they are who they say they are. Certifications are great. That along with experience, even better. Just be look for somebody that's going to keep you safe, keep you healthy, and keep you competing for a long time.
Heck yeah.
It's good.
All right, guys. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
It's been great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and follow us on Instagram for updates. We'll catch you next time on World's Strongest Opinions.